How are you, Doc?
Well, I'm okay as okay can be.
And I'm sure you made time to listen to the president last Sunday because everybody saw that as a critical address that would is supposed to perhaps give us some hope. Did it give you hope?
Yes, I did listen to the president. In fact, I went back to listen to it again. And you ask me, did it give me hope? The answer is no, it left me despondent.
It left you despondent.
Yes.
Okay, so what did you expect to hear from the president that you didn't hear?
It is not about what I expected to hear, it's about what he said and the factual inaccuracies of what he said. So you see, Sana, I'm someone who believes in data. As you introduced me, I'm a fellow of CDD Ghana and I'm a health fellow, so I deal in numbers. And for me, data is important, and the consistency of data for that matter is very important. So if a president is making an address and is referring to data, for example, he was referring to what do you call it, relative inflation rates in comparative and competitor countries, Senegal, Togo, etc., etc. The last thing I want is that not to be accurate. And why do I say that? This is data that you, Sena, and anyone who is in journalism can go onto the World Bank website or go onto Statista or Conima or any of these statistics portals. And because they are reported to these Bretton Woods institutions, you can actually go and check what the inflation rate was in 2019 as in what it was in 2022. So when the president was going through, I was doing those checks because I was trying to check the robustness of the information he was giving me. Because at the end of the day, you said it was one of his critical speeches. And therefore, you try to look at the credibility paradox. Can I trust what he's saying? So the minute I started seeing these
I love
inconsistencies,
Radio God
I started feeling
100.5.
despondent because I was like, at this point, we do not need this. It gave me an impression of someone who hadn't read over the speech or speechwriters who hadn't been bothered to research properly. And in a crisis, it gives me an impression of someone who doesn't pay attention to detail. And it's beginning to trickle through because you know all these things about what constitutes Ghana's debt and what doesn't constitute, what can be added, what cannot be added, and all these discussions are attention to detail. So when I see a lack of attention to detail at such a critical period, why wouldn't I be despondent? So it wasn't what I wanted to hear from the president, but it was how he made me feel about the effort he had put into preparing that address.
That's an interesting observation. And so, to you, did that affect the way you saw the whole address? Because you can have concerns with the data and statistics he's using, but perhaps the measures may give you some hope.
No. So if someone is um, putting a context together, I'm an academic, as you know, and in putting any document together, you'd have an introduction because that gives a context, or sometimes you have an executive summary. And for me, that was where the president was starting from, painting the global context as an executive summary for us to understand where he wanted to take us to. So if the executive summary or introduction is far removed from reality, then I ask myself, what has gone into the thinking into these measures? And then I'll go to where then I start seeing problems. So then the president is emphatic. Having made these statistical inaccuracies, the president is then emphatic to say there would be no haircuts. That was an emphatic statement. We've all heard it. And he said it with all the vigor, candor, and seriousness he could muster, only for the information minister to come and tell us that his understanding of what the president said was that there wouldn't be a haircut on principle, which means interest would attract a haircut. And now this is where it gets interesting. Let's say someone had £1,000 in the UK in August and was someone who was very, very interested in the Ghanaian market and so wanted to do foreign direct investment. So came in and bought 91-day treasury bills in Ghana. With that £1,000, that was 9,500 cedis that he invested. And let's say the coupon rate or the interest rate was 21%. When does the 91 days expire? September, October, November, this month. Now the pound is almost 16 cedis. So that £1,000, if he had left in the UK, would have been 16,000 in Ghana now. If he converts his 9,005, it's only £650. So he's lost £350 of his principal, which is a real-time haircut. So if his interest that might make up for this loss can be shaved off as well, where is the candor in what the president said? And that was why I started by saying I am someone who is data-driven. So if you start by giving me data that obfuscates the problem, I start critically analyzing what you're telling me. So this is how it made me feel. And then the next thing was try to get fuel that is cheaper. We all know that fuel is traded globally. In these times, every analyst I've listened to has said they wonder how the president is going to pull that off. So that's another thing. And we know that fuel prices, they've gone up today, are a driver of inflation because they feed into transport fares, they feed into food inflation, they feed into pharmaceutical inflation. So if that in itself is suspect, and we didn't hear anything because you know that our fuel prices are heavily padded by taxes. If the president wanted to drive it down, he could have said, while I do this to find this phantom, and I'll use that word, fuel cheap, I would shave off these taxes so that the real pump price would drop down so that the inflation can drop as well, so that your cost of living can be cushioned. We didn't hear that. So you see where I am coming from by saying that I'm sorry, but it left me despondent.
There are those who also talk about some of the things perhaps he missed. And you are focusing on the data. And they are also talking about some of the major discussions that have been going around in terms of you just had your MPs, a total majority of your MPs in Parliament demanding that you remove the finance minister. You come before the people and you don't say anything about it. You don't even open your mouth about it. Did that disappoint you also?
Well, for me, that demonstrates a lack of understanding of how markets operate. Look, the president made a statement by saying Sika Mpedide, right? Markets, they like credibility. So if the person coming to the market is coming with a cloud over his head, where the markets know that this person is going to deliver a budget, negotiate with the IMF, and if we are to believe what the president says, he's gone, which means he's not going to implement the contents of either his budget or the final IMF bailout if we get it. What message do you think that sends to the market? There's this phantom person behind the tree that the market would have to deal with for the rest of the president's tenure. Then the president ends up telling us, I'm going to do these things by 2028, by which time he'll be gone and will be sitting in his retirement parlor. But he doesn't tell us what he'll be doing between now and the end of 2024 when he has the mandate from us. So yes, and that's why I said it's not about what he didn't say. It's about what he said and the substance and the credibility.
And on the issue of petroleum, the proposal has been, because you're talking about the phantom cheap fuel, and there are those who are saying, well, the president has been very critical of Russia, but if he started talking about that, then perhaps a lot of countries are turning to Russia. He may be considering doing that. Isn't that an alternative?
Well, you see, You remember the Russian government put out a document talking about our net imports from them. The world is a place, and I call it a citadel of geopolitics, where, yes, you can probably go to Russia, but what message would it send to the UK? What message would it send to the G20 countries, who probably account for a significant amount of your trades? Who are the same people the finance minister said is going to for bilateral negotiations to try and manage our debt? The Germanys of this world, who now are being sabotaged by Russia because their gas supplies are being truncated. Would you go to these people for cheap fuel and risk your debt sustainability and not getting your IMF program? You see, and that's why I am saying that for me, it is the things that were said that left me despondent. Because yes, I could see the option of going to Russia, but I had to balance it against the zeitgeist of international geopolitics and how people are very sensitive to relatively smaller countries and the dynamics they project at this critical time.
So would a bit more detail have helped? Instead of saying tackle cost of living by working to stabilize prices of petroleum products through new supply arrangements, the president, you have a bit more detailed. I'm going to this person. We are looking at this place to get the fuel from because we feel that this is cheaper and we are considering it. Would it have helped if it was a bit more detailed in the way he put across some of these measures?
It would have helped. But the first thing that would have helped for me is candor. And what do I mean by candor? Candor to say, ultimately, you guys went to the ballot box to vest power in me. You gave me an executive mandate. As the executive who's presided over this country to this point, I take full responsibility for the situation we find ourselves in. I don't know if you listened to Liz Truss's resignation statement, where she justified her belief in the fact that you cannot tax yourself out of a crisis, but rather the citizens should keep the bulk of what they earn. The markets had revolted against it. So what did she say? I take responsibility. I realize I cannot deliver on my mandate, so I am going. That is a conviction politician, right? There was no taking of responsibility by the president. It was more like, oh, it's all the fault of that man behind the tree. All this COVID-19 and all this Russian-Ukraine war and all that. Meanwhile, these things are global phenomena, and they are affecting countries across the globe. The president then went on to say that unemployment is increasing across the globe. That was factually incorrect. Again, you can check International Labour Organization statistics. Unemployment is dropping in the UK. In fact, it's at its lowest ebb. The same thing is happening in the US. You see, so for me, it is about these things that can be fact-checked, that were being thrown out as facts, that actually gave me the despondency I'm talking to you about. And I don't think that augurs well for any country in a crisis.
Did this refusal to accept responsibility, or perhaps dodging that responsibility in any way, affect the content of what you read?
Well, I have said that the content was affected right from the outset, the preamble, the executive summary, the introduction. So for me, from that point, when I realized that these errors were apparent, and it was so quick, I mean, you had to take to social media. Friends of mine like Bright Simmons and other things immediately started posting on Twitter and other things saying, this is wrong. I saw another friend, Kofi Asari, posting. So people were listening to the speech and were also fact-checking. That in itself led to a loss of credibility. And so All these things, it's not one single thing that I can put my finger on. It's the little things that I've pointed out to you. And that is why I'm saying, as journalists, I'm quite sure you guys fact checked some of these things as well. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're not.
And so, how do you feel when, as a press person, you are supposed to cover something for your listenership, only to find out that the information you've been given has some extent of spuriousness? Did you think that you had that candid rigor to go and present it as it is, as though it was factual? No. And therefore, do you think that the discerning listener, who is listening as well to try and get an understanding of the situation we find ourselves in, just took it, hook, line, sinker, and rod? No. And that is the situation we find ourselves in.
And to the specific, should the president have announced the firing of the finance minister in that statement?
You see, I have always shied away from a comment on that, even though I have called for the finance minister to go. So, in that sense, I have clarity. But I'm also minded by our constitution, which gives the power to hire and fire to the president. So, that is his prerogative. His own MPs, 80 plus of them, some say 95, I don't have the full complement, have called for the finance minister to go. And in the sort of politics we do, it takes a lot for someone to call for the head of his own brother or sister. So I would have thought that as a father, a leader, you have taken cognizance of the fact that that carried a lot of weight. But did I expect him to announce it in that speech? No, because he had already met these MPs and had come out with a statement to say this person wasn't going to go. But before that, and more importantly, he had said that this finance minister was performing excellent and was one of his top 5 ministers in his government. He had also said that all the things we find ourselves in were not the fault of the finance minister, as though it was COVID who went to borrow on behalf of Ghana, as though it was COVID who sent our debt to GDP ratio to about 104%, as though it was COVID who came to hold the hands of the finance minister to actually collateralize a lot of our funds from Get Fund, you name it, you know all of them. Those were decisions by an individual and his advisors, not by COVID or Russia-Ukraine war. So if you then come and you tell me that that person is performing excellent, then obviously you are part of the problem.
Doc, the president's speech aside, I wanted to find out from you, what do you think are the hard decisions that we need to be taken at this time that are not being taken? Because having a problem with the credibility of the speech of the president means you give it, you have little confidence in it. But if looking at the situation, what's your own assessment of the things we need to be doing?
Well, the first thing we need to do is to decrease the size of our government. That's not rocket science, is it? You see, when you employ somebody, and we're all in employment, it is not just the salary you pay the person that determines the person's cost to the organization. It's also the perks that comes with the person's position. So if you have ministers who are driving V8s, who are at this time of fuel price, have fuel coupons and all that, have security, have housing, have free electricity, XYZ, that comes at a cost. And if these people at this cost have gotten us into this place, then I ask myself, is it relevant that they stay in those positions? So the first thing would have been to decrease the size of the government. And I would have wanted to hear that. I would have also wanted to hear something from the point of goal of government organizations. We've all seen the Auditor General's report, and we know a lot of government institutions are trading as a loss. Meanwhile, some of them have 3 and 4 deputy chief executives and all that. Why? If that company was yours, would you employ people to trade at a loss? So I expected to hear something like that. Then I expected to hear things around how to bring down food inflation, because whether you like it or not, food inflation is the main driver of a lot of the things we're seeing. So if it's true from the agric minister that there's a lot of food in the hinterland, but not in the peri-urban and urban areas, how are you going to get these foods to the market to decrease the inflationary pressure? So these are simple, basic things that I would have appreciated the president to have a clear handle on. As we sit here now, prices are going up, and I've not heard anything about those. So those are the specific things I would have wanted.
And I guess you heard him talk about food inflation to the extent that they will be discouraging, they would encourage traders to tone down profiteering, which is contributing to inflation. In fact, he didn't use profiteering, but essentially he's telling traders we are in this together. I know you are trying to get ahead of the time based on, so you add a lot more in anticipation that the prices will go up. But I think that if you just stay within, I guess you heard that. Will that suffice?
Yeah, I did hear that. But ask yourself this question: at the time the president was reading that statement, what was the cost of fuel? You know that a lot of our foodstuffs get to the cities by lorries that ply with diesel. This morning, some places are selling diesel as high as 23 cedis. I'm quite sure you're aware of that, a liter. So if that person doesn't anticipate these hikes and sold at what the president is saying, how does he replenish his stock or her stock? So, and that is why I'm saying that you have to look at the main driver. If then the president had talked about decreasing taxes on fuel so that the fuel wouldn't go up and the person can have some stability in the market around the cost of transportation, the cost of storage, etc., then yes, I would agree with it wholeheartedly that they shouldn't profiteer, because that in itself is not a very intelligent thing to do, or it's not patriotic either. I would agree with him on that. But when the drivers of the phenomenon are not being addressed, and 2 days after that speech, we've seen a hike, do you think if you went to the market today, you get the price of foodstuffs at what you got yesterday with the fuel price going up and transportation prices going up? No.
Well, now this morning I spoke to lawyer Martin Pebu. His proposal is what he is working on currently. In fact, there's a demonstration coming up on Saturday. And they are seeking the resignation of the president or impeachment by parliament if he does not resign. First of all, I'm sure you're monitoring preparations for that demonstration. What do you make of it? And then the objectives.
Look, I am a strong constitutionalist. I have always said that any system of governance that doesn't allow the people to change their leaders out of their own free will is not fit as a governance structure. That's my belief. So the first thing is we need to preserve our constitution and we need to preserve our democracy. That said, in that same constitution, it also behoves on the person who holds power in trust, because the president only holds power in trust for us as citizens, to keep his side of the bargain. And if he doesn't, there is the right to have peaceful demonstrations to force him to get his act together, or if he feels that he's incapable, to leave. I just referred to Lestrade, who's done that, and the United Kingdom hasn't come to an end. We saw Sri Lanka, that happened, and their democracy hasn't collapsed. So if that is constitutional, to ask the president to resign, note that I don't think Martin talked about overthrow of the government, because that should never be on people's lips, because we have to preserve this democracy. But for the president to resign, if all these things are going on, and if the finance minister is the best of his ministers, yes, I support it. And I support it wholeheartedly. because we cannot have this country go down the pants and just look on. The time for looking on is far gone. I've talked to you about so many things that do not look, the trajectory doesn't look right. And the trajectory looks like things might possibly get worse. So, why, in God's name, would I say, if someone is saying that the president must leave because of these things, I'd say that, oh, what he's saying is wrong. The Constitution allows for that. Doesn't the Constitution allow for the president to resign? Doesn't the Constitution say that there is a succession plan if the president should resign? Have you not seen the unfortunate happen to a president in Ghana for the succession plan to be triggered? So, if the president is showing signs that he lacks the capacity to lead the country in the direction that would help us all, and bear in mind, I keep saying these things. When you vote for a president, the minute you cast your ballot and the results are declared, the president is the president of Ghana. So at this time, calls like that, I always want to clarify, should not be seen in the political lens. They should be seen in the national interest lens, because at the end of the day, when you go to the market to buy, when you go to the pharmacy shop to buy, when you go to the fuel station to buy, they don't look at your CPP, NDC, MPP card to charge you. We are charged across the board. When you need Forex to trade, they don't look at your party card. So we need to sometimes be able to come together as Ghanaians and make calls that are in our best interest. And that is why I would support something like this, that the president either gets his act together, show us that he is getting his act together, or leave. And if he doesn't, like you said, Martin said, the Constitution also puts in place a system whereby Parliament can trigger actions against the president. So if this demonstration is so constitutionally grounded, I would support it.
Doc, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you for having me as well.
Dr. Kwame Sarpong Asiedu is Democracy and Development Fellow at CDD Ghana. Let me say a good morning to Sheikh Feneka Vokpo and Ricky Vivier. Both of them are still taking us through the French lessons on this whole matter of Afriwa's l'argent. You said, President said what?
L'argent, l'impa, l'époué.
I know that is not what he said.
Bureaucracy, French na omampani kano. And you're correct.
About Joe is in Italy.
Yes. I know that you are French.
He speaks French.
Sure. Also, I'm going to watch the Cote d'Ivoire friends now more Italy no masters. Also, or translate yourself as a company.
And also, there's Sedu Kwebu. Good morning to you. He is also saying what Conrad said was damn squib. That is less as impressive than expected. That's an interesting expression. Damn squib. Okay, Afrewa, we have a few minutes. Can you run us through before? Oh, okay. Well, Boachi, let me read a few messages so that when I take the break and come back, because I have another break, a very brief break coming up. Shama Ba is joining us. Says, good morning to you, Sena and the crew. Naneko for Adoken for and Data Bank. What's the real secret between them? One chair, one V8 is madness. It can't pair off. There's also Raymond Abiu says Ken Ofori-Atta must not only be removed as finance minister, but should also be investigated and prosecuted in regards to the borrowings he has engaged in over the past 6 years. Ghanaians deserve to know how the borrowed billions were utilized. Akufo-Addo's government is drowning Ghana financially, and Parliament owes it a duty to dig deep into the operations of Ken Ofori-Atta and his deputies at Finance Ministry. If we conduct a careful post-mortem into what brought us to where we are as a nation, the only thing you can find is a financial rapist, Ken Ofori-Atta. Kofi Simon is joining us. Good morning. Says all these people must. Okay. Good morning to you, Kofi Simon. And good morning to Kujo Fiti. It meant Petro impaired the day. Okay. Clearly. Mandy Williams Jakes is also joining us. Do you think this government can solve our problems? No. They don't understand that the problem in Ghana caused by fat government size from their first term today to cut the elephant-sized government. Esther Talata is also joining us. Good morning to you, Esther. And good morning to Oyibo Boatin is joining us. Gradually, the city is gaining strength against the dollar. That's Oyibo Boatin. Amina Ismail is joining us. Estella Graciela, good morning to you. Good morning to Navid Masse, who is saying a happy birthday, I think maybe to himself. Crespo is joining us from Fufo, says, okay, I think maybe to Kwekuchu Mesiodum. There is still hope for this country, no matter how the economic hardship we are passing through nowadays. Ghana will surely get back to its normalcy. That's Crespo from Fufu, who is joining us. Michael Nola McBain is also joining us, saying a good morning to us. A good morning to Newton Brony, who is also joining us. You see, Vura Akundo is joining us. The youth of Ghana, proud of you. Keep chasing the truth. Wishing you a happy and a pleasant Tuesday. There's Osman Lachi, who is also joining us. Albert Diwanu is joining us. Albert Mehondi now. Good morning to you. There's Sebastian Aston, who says, exactly. Taking off some taxes is the solution. I don't know why this government can't say this. Jose Agumabia says, Bawumia rather arrested the CD and gave the key to the dollar. Hence the galloping inflation. Good morning to you, Jose. Salah Sena, please tell him he should not believe the Ghana police because they can go to court for an injunction to stop them. Kobla is saying a good morning to us. Kumi Preko part 1 and 2. He says, Tijani Osman join us. Buzi Beto saying a good morning to us. A good morning to Akocha and Godwin Mahama, who is also joining us. I greet you all and the entire morning show crew. Indeed, you guys are doing a great job. I salute you. Good morning to you, Godwin Mahama. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Say, Masumba Jome, many land for any chaka bia. Order for several passasia mansu be anyone. Assasia won't cut a sub edimu. Look no further. Hearts Builders Real Estate ever sorted out. Yawan Sasinibi was Shine Hills, 13,000 cities. Chopoli 20,000. Ningo Pram Pram. Plot size and a 70 by 100. By a deposit of 4,000 Ghana cities. Diakano, yes, spread them on. It's Yaneka Pusumi Siatem. Who assassin the baby? Who perceive Besidan Esisumawa. Hearts Builders Real Estate. Your right choice. Yet on plumbing materials bia. Ye delivery our and cry anytime. Yes, so your cleaning services BAB. Boho ye too. A juba be for construction hono. Men kotu sikemu. For one Christmas promotion ya. Hearts Builders Real Estate at the Mount so. Freya CCR 0555 314 806 0241 665 200. Yawa Ashamai. Yani Mandela Park no eda edi enimshe. Hearts Builders Real Estate. We are your future planners.
Mira, say dear, my one dinner basro.
Yeah, met me who so what dinner back. Hey, Agbeve MW capsules. And I'm what dinner say. Can ye baby beer? Where the my bread, my ten caniade.
Say Agbeve MW capsules no. Abro mini pedia pomudin. And ama me jina me nine so. We dear, a money meme nyina neno. Enti ahode no obiye bi.
I like that. Agbeve typhon so the drinking honam say. Untumi di. And now what yare. Num Agbeve typhon bi. Le beme di kama da sa boni paduano akwotia nyarewa
Venus Gota asami yem kro eye stomach also use there bibia de din dada
Venus Gota no kre one man na siesie ye shem edi ye hunkomo se ya ne ania je
esa ye beko pharmacy herbal and chemical shops dodo a ye frɛ Agbeve herbal products 020813070 and 0246595256 appeal for abata woma nufo ene nkoda woni mfie dumienu nka ho FDA agi edwede nkrato yatum
That's when I take no back to this life. Ever upward. Seen? Them a talk about one love, but them never reach like that. Money, but they never reach like that.
Let me remind you that if you want male vitality, vigor and strength, for female vitality, low libido, during the game, you know both partners must have the same energy for a successful match. You need Agbeve MW capsules. We are introduced to you Agbeve MW capsules for male vitality, vigor and strength. For female vitality and dealing with low libido, get yourself Agbeve MW capsules. And for example, if you and if you do have ulcer, stomach ulcer, which includes peptic ulcer, gastritis, and duodenal ulcer, all you know is you have ulcer. What you need is venous gutter. It also treats urinary tract infection, vaginal discharges, penile discharges, and burning sensation in your private parts. Get yourself venous gutter. All these products are available at any pharmaceutical shop, herbal shop, drugstore, and chemical shops near you. But for bulk purchase, contact Agbeve Herbal Center on 0246 59 52 56 0246 59 52 56, or you can locate them as Wotum Last Stop. And of course, if you are in Asantiman and its environs, China Natural is closer to you. We have an ultramodern clinic in Kumasi, located at Santa Siotin Kwanta, to cater for your health needs. Very, very important. At China Natural, they use acupuncture or the massaging of the palms and foot for the treatment of blood pressure, kidney disorders, diabetes, stroke, and other diseases. They have treatment for sciatica, low sperm